deep breath. Here we are. Hi there, Nadia. Nadia Hancock is a survivor of History 300, a very happy survivor, I might add. I remember having some great conversations with you about sensory history and all sorts of stuff like that. And, you know, I'm interested in Nadia's position now that you're working at, in an archaeological survey domain and everything else. So there's that broader context, which I'd like you to talk to in a moment, and then we can sort of have a quick look at the aspects of History 300 that worked and maybe didn't work or whatever. So Nadia, tell us what you're doing, please. Tell us about adventures.
Adventures. I've had lots of great adventures. I'm currently working for an archaeological firm. So we work pretty much exclusively with Aboriginal native title bodies and corporations doing cultural heritage, giving cultural heritage advice and field surveys and cultural heritage management plans. So it's been an exciting time. We've just recently come back from a helicopter survey of a new potential new national park called the Lakes, up about 100 kilometres north of Hughenden, where we found some amazing sites, some reason like previously unrecorded sites and art galleries, and so that's where I am at the moment.
Where you are, it sounds terrific. I'm totally envious. So what year did you do History 300 in? It was about 2019 or something, would I be right?
Yeah, it might have. Yeah, it could have been just before the COVID year. So I think you're right. Yes.
It's probably 2019. So how did you find the course overall? What's your general take on History 300?
I love History 300. History 300 was one of my there's those certain kind of courses that change your brain. I think they give you that, and for me, History 300, I found sensory history in History 300. I had a week on emotions of history, and that was kind of my pathway, gateway drug into sensory history. And that's kind of been completely changed the way that I view history, but also being someone I really enjoy the theoretical side of history. History 300 kind of let you sink your teeth into those media aspects of history, and being able to, I think also that way of working with other students who had taken on something that they were very interested in. There's a lot more passion in the room than rather being given assessments that are just that's great. So to me, I'm passionate about history because I'm passionate about culture and where we've come from and all the different stories that each one of us carries. So what you're picking up on there is the diversity of people that we end up in a History 300 class. All sorts of interests bubble up. So that's great. So we work thematically through the course. What were the main takeaways for you? What did you get out of it? In terms of, you mentioned sensory history, and that would be obviously the cherry on the top of the cake, probably. Yes. And I remember you after the class, we were going somewhere, and you basically grabbed me and said, sensory history, tell me more. And I started sending you stuff just on a one-on-one basis, which is always really nice when a student actually steps out of the student-teacher relationship in that kind of more formalized, we're in a tutorial room, and actually says, hey, this just really amazes me or turns me on. Can you help me sort of explore that? So I remember that, but what were other things, Nadia, that you got out of the course? Goodness, I think there was quite a variety of in the course of different ways to approach history. So I really noticed that there was different weeks where people just got very excited because either this specific framework worked very well for their brain and other people's quite different. But the way I still think what I got most out of that course was
the importance of narrative, and that way of storytelling, which is really, bread and butter for historians and anyone really being able to tell a good story. I think we've got all these wonderful new tools and lots of different, I'm in an area that's really wedded to material culture and physical artifacts, but then being able to weave stories in is what makes that human connection. And I guess it's the whole reason why we do history, I think.
Yeah, and of course your work. You said you're writing a report or something, right? So I mean, that's a form of storytelling in itself. It's a formalized form of storytelling.
Yeah.
Do you think that the skills you learned in 300 helped or are helping you now?
Definitely. Yeah. So I think just the way learning to write in any university course, being a good writer is just, it doesn't matter. It's a transferable skill to every field, but being able to make a narrative and make a storyline and make something interesting to read, that's, I guess, that's where you become quite valuable to a place. Anyone can write a report if you've given a format, and you kind of plonk data in, but if you can make it readable, that's when you're actually going to be more likely to be requested, but to have your report, to have you be the person writing reports. So
Yep. Okay. So, and with you're doing a specific now quite embodied form of research. You're out there as an archaeologist, working with archaeologists, and so on. Research itself, of course, sits behind everything that we do in History 300. It's how do we think about it? What makes for good history or good research? Have you found that the thinking you did then has informed the way you think about your research now, your practical applied research?
Yeah, I think.
Question, I know.
Yes, very broad. But no, I think, I guess I kept coming back to sensory history because that was kind of the thing that really changed. And it was that finding a completely different lens to look at historical sources. And especially in archaeology where there's a distinct lack of sources, quite different. In History 300, I did smells in 18th century France, and that was, there's a lot of source for material for that. But then when you can go and look at something that's been looked at before and see it through a different lens, and come out, and I think then you can make it more relevant, or whole new readings can come out of sources. So
yeah, no, that's great. And I have to pick up on the other essay you did in 320 or whatever it was, where you went off to a church service in Latin.
Yes. Yes. Yep.
Speak briefly to that, because that's a form of research as well, of course.
Oh yes, and it made yes, that whole embodied experience of work just gives you kind of more of a insight and holistic. I can write a report from here. We do desktop research as well, but when you get to be actually in the field with the sounds and the the feeling of the place, it's completely different. So that paper that I kind of got to go a little bit further into sensory history in History 320 was on the experiential aspect of pilgrimages. And so, the museum that I also do work in as a science project Abbey Museum has a wonderful collection of stained glass, and I just really love that. And and thinking about the sensory aspects is just a way to revisit sources and come out with a completely different point of view, I think.
Okay. Yep. So that's great. So lots of pluses, lots of positive things that you're saying there. Was there anything you struggled with in the course?
Struggle. Yes. Well, I mean, I think the readings that are there to kind of push some boundaries and some limits of what what you can understand. And I think finding that kind of a little bit uncomfortable with some of these, or not quite understanding, but being able to still get, still push through with it. And then when you come together to hear other people's how they read the readings was possibly, getting through some of them were some of them were a delight. I loved things like the scent of time, the whizzing and popping, or there's definitely things that still there. I hope that one's still in the course.
It's still there.
Yes, there's some, and then other things that definitely kind of pushed up against things that was quite comfortable and understood, but it's it feels like an achievement to get on the other side of some of them, and after the first, second or third reading, or maybe a week or two after that whole week is done, when some other readings come in, then it all of a sudden clicks into place and all starts making sense.
Thank you. That's a nice message. It takes time.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
One of the other people that I've interviewed, Nadia, she said that it was actually literally week 12 or something when suddenly a lot of it just went, oh.
Yes.
Before that, I was like, ah.
Oh, she's good. Sometimes it's usually completely when the subject's over and I'm like, oh, I know now. And that makes sense, of course.
Well, it's like they're in week 12, so.
Yes.
That's good. So thank you. Yeah, so give yourselves time, I think, is a real message. And of course, I have to say, even of myself, I've been working with these texts for years, but there's always new insights coming out of them. And because it's a relationship that you're having, it's like every time you go back to a text, it's a conversation in a sense with somebody. And, that doesn't matter whether they're alive or dead, you're dealing with their thinking and their words. And that does take time. Yeah.
It's like the Heraclides, where was it? Heraclides River, that you can never step into the same one twice because you're always different and the river's different. So every time you kind of dip back into any of these texts, you're coming at it from a different point of view. And
he's a pre-Socratic philosopher, by the way, if you want to go and look him up. Very famous, isn't it, that saying about the river? So last question for you, Nadia. Advice. Any advice you give beyond what we've already said, I guess, to students starting out on this journey in History 300?
I think, it probably dovetails a bit into the last one, but doing the readings makes it so much more constructive. I know it's one of those that's, that's advice for every single subject, but especially for when you're having so much theoretical debate, being able to bring those more difficult concepts into a room of people who have also read it and kind of working it out in that setting, I find for me that's the greatest benefit. So definitely the weeks when I skimped a little bit on the readings, you just don't, you get out what you put in, I think.
Yeah, that's great advice. And of course, you're speaking to something that other people haven't really spoken to so much in these interview series, is that it's the discussion in the class that can make it a really enriching experience, because somebody will see something totally different in a reading that you've seen. Oh, yes, it's kind of, yeah. And so that's why I use the word colloquia even it's in the course outline, that, in colloquia, we do this. And colloquia, of course, is a Greek thing. It comes from those symposia that Plato writes about. They're all sitting around knocking back, good red wine and chatting with Socrates. What could be better?
The red wine, maybe, but
the red wine was actually, they normally diluted it because it was very strong. The Greek red wine was very strong.
That sounds like a wonderful sensory experience.
It does. And the whole thing was totally sensory. It was really, really wonderful. The Greeks knew how to do sensory really well. Okay, Anything to add, Nadia, before we wrap up?
No, enjoy.
Well, thank you again for giving me your time over your lunch. You'll be munching a sandwich instead of yakking with us. But I'll stop the recording now, and yeah, I will look forward to having another chat.
Thank you.
There we go.